They told me to call my brother if I needed money that bad. My own daughter had just closed on a house in the Woodlands with a 3-car garage, and her mother told me to go ask my son instead, the one driving a delivery truck for a produce company. That sentence has been sitting in my chest for 2 months now like a stone I can't cough up. I didn't argue with Patricia that night. 62 years old, and I just sat there at my own table and took it. But before I tell you the rest, I need you to understand something. This isn't really a story about money. It's a story about who still shows up when you're the one who's broke and scared and running out of time. Let me back up first. I live in a duplex off Route 9 outside Wilmington, Delaware. The kind of place you rent when you tell yourself it's temporary and then 15 years go by. The siding's gone gray where it used to be white. I keep saying I'll pressure wash it come spring. It was a Thursday night in early June, warm enough that the window units were already fighting a losing battle, and I was at the kitchen table sorting through a stack of mail I'd been avoiding for a week. A shut-off notice from Delmarva Power. A letter from my cardiologist's billing office that I already knew wasn't good, because good news doesn't come folded in triplicate. Patricia's phone buzzed on the counter. I watched her whole face light up like somebody had thrown a switch behind her eyes. There it is, I thought. The only smile that still shows up around here, and it's never for me. Danielle, honey, she near about sang it. Tell me everything about the closing. I set my coffee down. Is that Danielle? Let me say congratulations. She didn't even turn her head my way. She angled her whole body toward the living room, like I was a cold draft she needed to shut a door on. A 4-bedroom colonial. A 3-car garage. Danielle's husband's law firm making partner talk. I sat there and listened to my wife of 33 years gush at our daughter like she'd cured something instead of just signing a mortgage. I'm not telling you this to sound bitter. I'm telling you because it's true, and because you need to know what normal looked like in my house before I tell you what happened next. Patricia hung up eventually, still glowing, walked back into the kitchen, and the smile dropped off her like a mask coming loose. She's doing so well, Walter. That's good, I said. And I meant it. Whatever's gone sideways between me and that girl, I never once wished her anything but well. Patricia didn't say another word. She just slid the power bill across the table at me. Didn't ask about the chest pains I'd been having for 3 weeks straight, the ones I kept blaming on heartburn. Handle this before they cut it off again, she said. Again, like it was a pattern. Like I was the pattern. Welcome to the channel. By the way, if you're new here, stick around, because this story goes somewhere. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. You're going to want to see how this one ends. Now here's where I'm supposed to make myself look better than I am, and I won't do that, because the truth is worse than anything I could invent, and it's the only thing that matters. 12 years ago, I wasn't some fool who blew the family's savings at a blackjack table in Atlantic City. I ran a small HVAC and refrigeration business, 3 trucks, 6 guys on payroll, nothing fancy but steady. Then, a commercial client, a regional grocery chain, went bankrupt, owing me $180,000 for a cold storage installation I'd already paid my suppliers for out of pocket. The lawsuit dragged 4 years. I won it on paper. Never collected a dime, because there was nothing left to collect from a dead company. My credit cratered. I had to let the crew go 1 truck at a time. Patricia never once asked if I was okay. She asked how I planned to fix it. That was 12 years ago. I've been running service calls for another man's HVAC outfit ever since, 6 days most weeks, coming home smelling like refrigerant and sweat. And somewhere in there, my son Marcus turned 20 and decided his whole life got ruined because I couldn't help him with a down payment on a truck he wanted. He's never let that go. Not once. Not even after I sat him down and explained where every dollar had gone. In his head, I failed on purpose. Maybe a man needs a villain sometimes, and I happened to be standing there. My son's different from what you're picturing right now, though. Marcus is 28. Drives a delivery route for a wholesale produce company out of a warehouse in Newcastle, up before dawn most days, hauling crates of lettuce and citrus into restaurant kitchens up and down 95. He was 16 when the lawsuit swallowed the business. Old enough to remember what we had. Old enough to watch me rebuild something out of nothing instead of just grieving what got taken. He came by 2 nights after that phone call with Danielle, carrying a Tupperware of his mother's old pot roast recipe, the one I taught his mother actually years back, heavy on the rosemary. He didn't say one word about Bill's or Danielle's colonial. He just set the container down, squeezed my shoulder, and said, "You look gray, Pop. You sleeping okay?" "Just tired," I told him. "Uh-huh." He didn't believe me. Never did. "You're seeing Dr. Alvarez this week." I already looked up the number. I didn't argue. There wasn't much point arguing with Marcus. He got that stubbornness from somewhere, and I had a suspicion it traced right back to me. Dr. Alvarez wasn't smiling when he came back into the exam room. He set the folder down like it weighed 40 pounds. "Walter, I'm not going to dance around this. 2 of your arteries are blocked bad. You need a bypass, and you need it inside of 3 weeks, not 3 months. There it is, I thought. The other shoe. Okay, I said. Because what else do you say? Then the woman from billing came in. Nice enough. Name of Renata. Looking about as uncomfortable as a person can look. Told me my insurance had a coverage gap on the specific surgical approach. Dr. Alvarez wanted to use something about an out-of-network surgical assistant required for that particular procedure. $4,000, due before they'd even put me on the schedule. I can set up a payment plan for the balance after, Renata said, but the pre-authorization deposit's due up front. Hospital policy, $4,000. You want to know something funny? I used to clear more than that in a single good week back before the lawsuit ate my business alive. Now I sat out in my truck in that parking lot, an 11 Ranger with 190,000 miles on it, and I did the math 6 different ways, and it came out the same every time. I didn't have it. My credit was still garbage. No bank in Newcastle County was going to touch me. $4,000, I thought, and I've got a daughter with a 3-car garage and a husband who bills $400 an hour. I told myself I wouldn't call her. Told myself that for 2 straight days. Then I called anyway. Because that's what a father does. You swallow what's left of your pride and you hope, God, you hope she's still in there somewhere underneath all that new money. She picked up on the 5th ring, and I heard it right off ice clinking in a glass. Somebody's laugh in the background, the kind of laugh that costs something. Dad, hey, can this wait? We're at the club with the Whitfields. Danielle, I need to talk to you about something serious. Okay, give me a second. Muffled sound, like she'd covered the phone. Then, all right, go ahead. I told her all of it. The blockages, the bypass, the gap in coverage, the $4,000 I needed inside the week or they wouldn't schedule the surgery. There was a pause, a long one. Long enough that for one stupid second I thought, maybe, Danielle, maybe. Her voice went flat, careful, the way lawyers' wives learn to talk. Dad, I love you, but Trevor and I just closed on the house. We're stretched thin right now with the new mortgage and the renovation budget. This isn't a renovation, Danielle. This is my heart. I know, and I'm sorry, but $4,000 isn't nothing to us right now either. Can't the hospital work with you on a payment plan? Everybody does payment plans. A pause, and then, quieter, harder to hear. You knew your insurance situation. You should have upgraded your plan during open enrollment like I told you to. I'm asking my daughter for help staying alive, and you're bringing up open enrollment. Don't do that, Dad. Don't make me the villain because I have boundaries. The line went dead. Just like that. My own daughter hung up on me while I sat in a hospital parking lot with a failing heart so she could get back to cocktails with the Whitfields. I called Patricia next, asked if she'd talk some sense into Danielle, soften her up. Don't you dare put that on her. Patricia snapped. She worked hard to get where she is. Marcus makes decent money at that warehouse job, doesn't he? Go ask him. I hung up and sat in that parking lot a long, long time. Didn't cry. I was past crying by then. Just sat there thinking about how a man works his whole life to hold a family together and ends up alone in a rusted-out Ranger doing math that refuses to come out right. I met Marcus 2 days later at a diner off Route 40, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress who calls every man hun. I hadn't planned on telling him. I was going to eat my eggs and let him think everything was fine. He knew before I said one word. Pop. He set his fork down. What's wrong? Tell me right now. So I told him, and I want you to understand, I was ashamed to even be sitting across from my 28-year-old son, a man who hauls produce crates for a living and probably doesn't have $4,000 sitting anywhere, about to ask him for help. His own sister had refused without blinking. I didn't even finish getting the words out. Marcus reached into his jacket and set an envelope on the table, then turned his phone around so I could see the screen a notification from a credit union. Approved. Personal loan, $2,500. Dad, stop talking. His eyes were wet, but his voice wasn't shaking at all. There's $1,500 cash in there too. I sold my motorcycle this morning. My throat closed up. You sold the Harley? Bikes can be replaced. He reached across and grabbed my hand, the way you grab hold of something you're not letting go of. You can't. I'm taking the bus to the warehouse for a while until I save up for something used. It's fine. Gives me time to think in the mornings. I sat in that booth and wept in front of a waitress named Donna and half the breakfast crowd off Route 40. And my son, the one nobody bragged about on the phone, the one who never got the credit union approval story told at a dinner party, held my hand across a Formica table and told me I was going to be all right. He's the only one who ever really saw me, I thought. I had no idea, sitting in that diner, just how much that morning was about to matter. I had no idea what was still sitting 50 miles south of us in a warehouse full of dead refrigeration equipment, waiting on me to remember it existed. But that comes later. Stay with me here, because it matters. A letter showed up at my son's apartment while I was still flat on my back, recovering from open-heart surgery, and it was worth more than every dollar my daughter ever refused me. I sat with that letter for 4 days before I told a single soul. But let me take you back to the morning of the surgery first, because you need to understand what it cost to get to that letter crossed. They wheeled me into pre-op at 5:30 in the morning on a Tuesday in late June, and the last thing I remember before the anesthesia took me under was Marcus's face right up close to mine, his hand squeezing my fingers. You're gonna be fine, old man. I already told the nurses you're too stubborn to die on a Tuesday. Where'd he learn to be that steady? I thought. 28 years old and steadier than I've ever been in my whole life. Then the lights went out. I woke up 9 hours later with a tube down my throat and a weight on my chest like somebody'd parked a delivery truck on it. Dr. Alvarez came by that evening, still in his scrubs, leaned down close so I could hear him over the monitors. We got good flow through both grafts, Walter. Clean work. You did fine. I didn't cry. Didn't have the energy. I just lay there thinking about Marcus's motorcycle sitting on some stranger's driveway now with a different man's helmet on the seat. He bought me this, I thought. Not the insurance company. Not the hospital. My son bought me this with a credit union loan and a bike he loved. I'm going to make this right, I told myself. However long it takes, whatever it costs me, I had no idea how soon that promise was going to come due. I spent the next 3 weeks recovering on Marcus's pull-out couch because my own house had gone quiet and cold. Patricia hadn't so much as texted to ask how the surgery went, and I wasn't about to lie up alone listening to my own heart monitor at home. Marcus's apartment was small, 1 bedroom over a laundromat near the warehouse, the kind of place where you hear the dryers rumbling through the floor at midnight. He'd taped his bus schedule to the fridge with a magnet from a produce distributor, right next to a photo of the two of us at a Phillies game from years back. I looked at that bus schedule every single morning. He's out there right now, I thought, standing at a stop in the cold before sunrise, because he sold his bike for me, and Danielle's driving a leased Range Rover to a Pilates class she posts about online. That thought sat heavier in my chest than the surgical scar. He'd come home smelling like cardboard and cold storage, check my incision, heat up whatever was easiest for dinner. He wasn't much of a cook, my Marcus, but he tried. He'd sit with me some nights and watch whatever game was on, and never once, not one single time, did he bring up the bike, or the loan, or ask when I'd pay him back. That's the difference, I thought, watching him doze off in a kitchen chair one night, still in his work boots. Danielle gives when there's an audience. Marcus gives like it never even occurred to him not to. It's just love to him, plain as that. It was a Wednesday, 19 days after the surgery, when the mail carrier knocked instead of just leaving it in the box downstairs. Marcus was on his route. I answered in my robe, still moving slow, still tender through the ribs. Got 2 certified letters here. Need a signature. One was from an outfit called Brandywine Logistics Partners. The other had a return address I knew instantly, because I'd been getting mail from them for 12 straight years, the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control. Here we go, I thought. Another update, another 6 months of nothing. See, what I never told you yet is that back before the lawsuit finished burying me, I'd sunk what savings I had left into 40 acres of land off Route 13 near Middletown, planning to build a second warehouse and shop for the business. Then a fuel distributor 2 properties over had an underground tank leak, and the contamination plume crossed onto my land before anybody caught it. My 40 acres got locked under a state remediation order the same year my lawsuit went under. Couldn't sell it, couldn't build on it, couldn't do one blessed thing but keep paying property taxes on dead dirt for over a decade. I almost set that letter on the counter unopened and went back to the couch. Something made me sit down at Marcus's little kitchen table instead and tear it open right there. I read it twice, then a third time slower, because I didn't trust my own eyes. Remediation complete. Site released from state. Environmental oversight. Effective May 30. Released. Clean. 12 years of property taxes on land I couldn't touch. 12 years of my credit sitting in the gutter. 12 years of my own wife looking at me like a stain on the family carpet. And there it was in black and white. Done. I set that letter down like it might go off if I moved too fast. Then I opened the second one. Brandywine Logistics Partners, it turned out, had been quietly buying up parcels along that Route 13 corridor for 2 years, betting on a new distribution hub tied to the port expansion in Wilmington. My 40 acres of worthless, contaminated swamp sat directly in their footprint now, and the offer inside that envelope had real numbers behind it, not some lowball feeler. $11 million cash, 45-day close. I read that figure maybe 20 times. I want to tell you, I hollered and ran laps around that little apartment. I didn't. I sat very still. $11 million, I thought. And 3 weeks ago I was crying into a plate of eggs because I couldn't scrape together 4,000. I looked up, and my eyes landed right on that bus schedule taped to the fridge, his handwriting in the margin. Route 6, 5:52 a.m. Because he'd had to memorize a whole new commute at 28 years old just to save his father's life. He's out there right now, I thought, standing at a bus stop before the sun's even up, and I'm sitting here holding $11 million. I didn't call Patricia. I didn't call Danielle. I want you to remember that, because it matters for what comes later. I never hid this money from anybody. I just didn't see one reason to hand good news to people who'd already told me, in their own words, that my problems weren't theirs to carry. I called somebody else instead, Ray Delgado, who'd handled what legal affairs I had left after the lawsuit, one of the only people who stuck around because I still paid him something every month, on time, no matter how thin it stretched. Ray, it's Walter. I need you to look at some paperwork today, if you can. Something in my voice must have told him this wasn't a check-in call. I told him everything, the DNREC release, the Brandywine offer, the number, long pause on the line. 11 million, he finally said. Walter, that changes everything. I know it does. That's exactly why I need you to pull something else first. You remember a document Patricia had drawn up about 6 years back? Ray went quiet. The asset separation agreement. Marcus's idea. No, wait. That was Danielle's idea, wasn't it? That's the one. I remember it. I told Patricia at the time I didn't love it, but she was insistent, and it was her legal right, given the lawsuit exposure. He paused. You want me to pull the original? I want you to read me the exact language, word for word. Don't skip anything. Because if I remembered that document right, Patricia hadn't just protected herself from my failure, she'd signed away every future claim to whatever came of that land, good or bad. Ray called back 2 hours later, papers shuffling on his end. Walter, here's the operative clause. Patricia Reyes hereby waives, releases, and forever discharges any and all present or future marital claim, interest, or right, legal or equitable, in and to the real property located in Newcastle County, described herein, including any proceeds, appreciation, or value realized therefrom, regardless of cause. Regardless of cause, I repeated, slow. Ray, does that mean what I think it means? It means exactly what we drew up, Walter. 6 years ago, she wanted the house and her retirement account protected from any judgment against the business. So she took those as her sole separate property, and in exchange you took full, sole ownership of that contaminated land, debts and all. Notarized, binding. Whatever happens to that land now bad, or 11 million kinds of good, she signed away every legal claim to it. Danielle was the one who pushed for it, wasn't she? She set the meeting with the lawyer, told her mother it was smart, told her it would protect the house if the land ever got seized. I almost laughed, except nothing about it felt funny. Well, Ray said, exhaling slow, smart, all right. Just not in the direction anybody thought. I sat there at Marcus's kitchen table with the afternoon light coming through those thin blinds, and for the first time in 12 years, I felt something in my chest that wasn't shame and wasn't grief. Clarity. Ray, I want to move on the Brandywine offer. Quiet. I don't want a soul outside this call knowing until it's done. Not Patricia, not Danielle. Especially not Danielle. I looked at that bus schedule one more time. Draw up whatever needs drawing. I want the sale closed, and I want an irrevocable trust set up alongside it, in Marcus's name. Ray didn't say anything for a second. All of it, Walter? Every dime, after my debts are cleared. He sold his motorcycle for me, Ray. Took out a credit union loan at whatever rate they stuck him with, so I could get on an operating table. He's been standing at a bus stop before dawn for 3 weeks, so I'd have somewhere to heal. My throat went tight. Had to stop a second. Meanwhile, my daughter told me to look into open enrollment while she was drinking with the Whitfields, and my wife told me not to put that on her. So no, I'm not splitting this down the middle for the sake of looking fair. Fair already happened. Fair happened in a diner off Route 43 weeks ago, and only one of my children walked through that door. I hear you. I'll have paperwork ready by Friday. A beat. One more thing, Walter. You want your name kept off the deed for wherever he ends up living. Trust owns it outright. I don't want one single piece of this anybody can argue over later. Airtight. Airtight, Ray said. Understood. I hung up and sat a long while in that quiet apartment, listening to a dryer thump downstairs, looking at that bus schedule stuck up with a produce company magnet. They're going to find out eventually, I thought. And when they do, they're not walking in here asking how my heart's healing. They're walking in here asking about money. That's just who they are now. Maybe who they always were, and I just didn't want to look at it straight on. I wasn't wrong about that. Hold on to that thought, because it's exactly what happened, just not for the reason I expected. See, I figured Danielle and Patricia would show up because word got out about the land. They didn't know one thing about the land yet when they showed up at Marcus's door 11 days later. They showed up because Danielle's husband's firm had lost a major client. Their renovation budget had ballooned past what the new mortgage could carry, and Danielle needed money so badly she was willing to walk into the one apartment she'd never once set foot in. Before that day, her broke father's temporary bedroom on her brother's pull-out couch. She had no idea what she was about to find waiting for her there. I'd had 11 days to get ready. If you've made it this far, drop a comment and let me know. Hit that like button too. It actually helps this story reach people who need to hear it. My daughter walked into that apartment ready to ask me for a bailout with one hand and remind me of my obligations with the other. She had no idea I was holding a document that had frozen her out 6 years before she ever knocked on that door. 11 days. That's how long I had between hanging up with Ray and hearing that first hard knock. Mostly I just healed. Walked a little farther each morning around the parking lot. Sat on Marcus's narrow balcony some evenings watching the sun drop behind the laundromat sign, thinking about 40 acres of land that had finally, after 12 years, stopped punishing me. Then that Thursday evening came, and somebody pounded on the door hard enough to rattle it in the frame. Dad, I know you're in there. Open up. Danielle's voice, sharper than I'd heard it in years, something underneath it I didn't recognize at first. Marcus got to the door before I could push up off the couch. He pulled it open with a look on his face I'd bet he uses on customers who try to shortchange a delivery. You want to explain why you're beating on my door like the cops? Danielle pushed past him without answering. Patricia right behind her, arms crossed, jaw set. Neither one looked at me first. Not one word about the surgery, Not one question about the scar still healing under my shirt. Dad. Danielle's voice cracked slightly in the middle. We need to talk. Now. There it is, I thought. Not how are you feeling. Not I'm sorry I hung up on you in a hospital parking lot. Straight to business, same as always. Sit down, Danielle. You look like you're about to need a cardiologist yourself. She didn't sit. She paced Marcus's little living room in heels that didn't belong on that carpet. Trevor's paralegal pulled a title alert today. Brandywine Logistics filed a deed memorandum on 40 acres off Route 13. Your land, Dad, $11 million, cash. You sold it. Patricia's mouth fell open. 11, Walter. Is that true? So that's how they found it, I thought. Not from me. From a paralegal running searches. Almost funny, in a sick sort of way. It's true, I said, calm as I could hold it. Closed 11 days ago. 11 days? Danielle's voice climbed a register. You've had this for 11 days and didn't call your own daughter? I looked at her a long moment before I answered. Last time I called you, Danielle, you were at the club with the Whitfields, and you told me to look into open enrollment while I sat in a hospital lot trying to figure out how to pay for a bypass. You told me not to make you the villain for having boundaries. So no, I didn't feel any urgent need to call the second something good happened either. That should have been the moment she softened. It wasn't. You hid this from us. Her finger came up, jabbing the air like it made the words truer. You knew the site cleanup was finishing. You knew that land was about to be worth something. You let us think you were struggling this whole time while you sat on a fortune, just so you could hand it all to your favorite. She actually believes that, I thought. Rewriting the whole thing in real time, right in front of me, and believing every word coming out of her own mouth. Danielle. My voice came out quieter than hers, which somehow made the room go quieter too. I didn't know that land was worth a nickel until 19 days ago. Found out sitting right there on your brother's pull-out couch, recovering from surgery he paid for. You want to talk about hiding things? I didn't hide a fortune from this family. I hid the fact that I was terrified for 12 straight years, because every time I tried to bring it up, your mother told me to fix the power bill, and you told me I ruined your 20s over a truck down payment. Patricia stepped in, chin up, arms still crossed. Don't you dare stand there and play the victim, Walter. I stood by you for 33 years while you dragged this family through one financial disaster after another. That money belongs to this family. You're being vindictive. You're being cruel, Danielle said, and stingy. Stingy. I almost laughed out loud at that one. A woman who wouldn't front her father $4,000 for heart surgery, calling him stingy over $11 million. We're not asking anymore, Danielle said, and here's where her voice really shifted, dropped low, sharp, the voice of somebody who thought she was about to win. Mom's filing for divorce tomorrow. Financial abandonment, irreconcilable differences, the whole filing. Trevor's already drafting a motion to freeze every account tied to that sale until the courts sort out an equitable split. You concealed marital assets, Dad. That's not gray area. That's fraud. She slapped her palm flat on Marcus's kitchen table, the same table where, weeks before, he'd slid an envelope of cash across without a second thought. You're going to be tied up in litigation so long you won't have a dollar left standing by the time we're through. Trevor's firm will bury you. I glanced at Marcus's face. That's my son's kitchen table, and she just slammed her hand on it like she paid the rent here. I looked at Danielle a long moment. Then Patricia. Then I stood, slow, careful, still tender through the ribs, and reached into my jacket for 2 folded documents. You want to talk about lawyers, Danielle? Let's talk about lawyers. I slid the first one across to Patricia. You remember signing this? She looked down, and I watched the color drain out of her face before she'd even finished the first line. 6 years ago, I said. You and Danielle sat me down at my own kitchen table. You were scared the lawsuit judgment would come after the house and your retirement. Danielle's idea, by the way, her brilliant idea, told you it was smart. Told you it would keep your credit clean if that contaminated land ever got seized for my debts. So you signed this. Your lawyer drew up a full asset separation. You took the house and your accounts as your sole property, and you legally handed me 100% of that land, debts and all, as mine. I tapped the page. Read it again. It doesn't say debt. It says regardless of cause. You didn't just protect yourself from my failure, Patricia. You signed away every future claim to whatever that land became, good or bad, just to keep your hands clean. Your own lawyer explained every word of it. Danielle sat right there and heard it too. Danielle's face had gone pale, but she wasn't done, never was. That doesn't matter. We'll still take you to court. On what grounds? I slid the second document to her. Take a look before you finish that sentence. She looked down. A bank statement. Marcus's checking account. $41. That's what's in your brother's account right now. I said. $41, Danielle. Because 3 weeks ago he sold his motorcycle and took out a credit union loan so I could get on an operating table. While you were at the club, telling me to check my open enrollment options, your brother was standing at a bus stop before sunrise so he'd have a way to get to a warehouse job that pays him $38,000 a year. I let that sit in the room a second. You want to talk about court? Bring every lawyer Trevor's firm has got. But before you do, you go ahead and explain to a judge how you plan to claim a share of assets your mother waived in writing 6 years ago on your own advice. And explain where you were the night your father needed $4,000 for heart surgery and where your brother was. Nobody said a word for a long moment, just a dryer thumping somewhere below us, same as it had every night for 3 weeks straight. I didn't hide this to be cruel, I said, and my voice finally came down soft, tired, done. I found out about that land's release sitting right there on that pull-out couch, 17 days after surgery. Took 20-some days to close. Trust got finalized last week. I kept it quiet because I needed time to make sure it landed with the only person who actually earned it. But I want you both to understand something. Even if I'd known months sooner, it wouldn't change one thing about this moment. You two divorced yourselves from this family a long time ago. You just hadn't gotten around to the paperwork. Yet, I looked at Marcus. The trust's already finalized, irrevocable. The full $11 million goes to my son, all of it. First thing Ray did this morning was pay off that credit union loan in full. Next, he cleared the title on this whole building so you don't owe a dime in rent while I find you something better. There's a truck waiting on you, nicer than the bike you sold, though you're going to fuss at me about that. I folded my hands. You're both free of my mistakes now. Isn't that what you always wanted? 12 years I heard how I ruined this family. Well, congratulations. It's over. And it turns out the two of you signed yourselves right out of everything that came after it. Patricia's mouth opened. Nothing came out. First time in longer than I could remember that my wife didn't have a word ready. Danielle just stood there, jaw working, staring at that bank statement like it might rearrange itself if she looked hard enough. Get out of my son's home, I said. Quiet. Final. They left in a silence I'd never once heard between the three of us in 33 years of marriage and 28 years of raising that girl. No slammed door, no last word, just two people walking out, realizing in real time that the very cleverness Danielle had always been so proud of the legal maneuver she'd talked her own mother into was the exact thing that had locked them both out of a fortune neither one would ever touch. Marcus stood in the kitchen doorway after they'd gone, arms wrapped around himself, watching me. Pop, his voice barely a whisper. You didn't have to give me all of it. Yeah, I said. I did. I walked over and put my arm around him, careful of my ribs, and we stood there a minute in that little apartment that wouldn't be his much longer, not because he was losing it, but because he was finally getting more than he'd ever thought to ask anybody for. Bikes can be replaced, I remembered him telling me weeks before, sliding an envelope across a diner table. You can't. Turned out he'd been right about that. Turned out I couldn't be replaced either. Not to him. And in the end, that was worth more than any number Brandywine Logistics ever put on a piece of paper. We stood there in the quiet, my son and me, finally safe. And somewhere across town that night, my daughter sat down to figure out how she was going to explain to Trevor that the fortune she'd been counting on wasn't coming, and there wasn't a single soul left in her corner willing to bail either one of them out. Funny how that works out. If this one got to you, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. I'll see you in the next one. Money doesn't reveal character, it just makes it impossible to hide anymore. A motorcycle sold without a second thought will always outweigh a bank account someone brags about. So notice who shows up when you have nothing to offer back, and hold on to them tight, because that quiet, unglamorous kind of love is the only fortune that never comes with fine print. A small note for you. This story was written and imagined by AI for entertainment purposes, though we hope its message about love and gratitude still warms your heart.